Hello, my name is Agnes Benny and welcome to my presentation on human immunity. During this presentation I will discuss the following topics: the first and second line of defense, the third line of defense and acquired, adaptive or specific immunity, self-recognition and tolerance, specific immune system disorders, categories of acquired immunity, vaccination programs, and factors affecting vaccine uptake. Before I discuss how the body defends itself against disease, I am going to discuss what causes disease and how it spreads. What is an infection? An infection is the invasion of the body by microorganisms. Methods of transmission include direct, indirect, insect bites, and contamination. Examples of these can be seen in Figure 1. Not all illnesses generate symptoms, and they aren't always easy to spot. For example, coronavirus. Coronavirus infection spreads through intimate contact, such as through coughs and sneezes or through hand touch, similar to the common cold. Direct contact with infected people, as well as indirect contact with surfaces in a local environments or products used in the sick person, can spread the COVID-19 virus. If a person does not wash their hands after contacting contaminated surfaces, they can contact the virus. Direct and indirect contact with a person or animal who is the carrier for the illness is the easiest way to get most infectious diseases. Infectious diseases include malaria, measles, and respiratory disorders. There are four main causes of diseases such as bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Bacteria is a single-celled organism that causes a variety of illnesses including cellulitis, strep throat, urinary tract infections, and tuberculosis. Viruses cannot multiply without the presence of a host, and fungi are responsible for many surface skin infections such as athlete's foot, and also can cause infections of the lungs or neurological system. They cause a wide range of illnesses including colds, HIV, and AIDS. Malaria is carried via mosquito bites, and parasites are the germs that cause the sickness. Other parasites can be passed from animals to people through their feces. The immune system can be divided into three basic lines of defense against pathogenic infection. Examples of these can be seen in Figure 2. Surface barriers, which prevent germs from entering the body at the first line of defense against infection. The non-specific phagocytes and other internal systems that make up the innate immunity are the second lines of defense. The cells that create antibodies are part of the adaptive immune response constitute the third line of defense. The skin is one of the three major layers that make up the integumentary system, which includes the nails and hair. These can be seen in Figure 3. The skin serves as a barrier between infectious and internal organs and functions. We have an effective barrier as long as the skin is not broken. This means that your skin acts as a barrier against germs. The primary line of defense against infectious disease is the skin. It's a type of surface barrier that serves to safeguard the body's exterior boundaries by keeping the viruses from entering. Skin is made up of three layers that make up the integumentary system. The epidermis is the outer layer of the skin that serves as a mechanical and waterproof barrier between intruders and our bodies. The dermis is the skin's middle layer, which contains blood vessels, nerve endings, and hair follicles. The subcutaneous layer is the deepest layer. It's mostly made up of fat, connective tissue, bigger blood vessels, and nerves, and it serves as a shock absorber against our bodies. Mucous membranes are another example of first line of defense. Mucous membranes line your eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, throat, gastrointestinal tract, respiratory systems, urogenital tract, and vaginal tract as seen in Figure 4. They serve as a principal link between the outside world and your body's initial environment. The roles of the mucous membranes can be seen in Figure 5. Mucous membranes keep your body healthy by allowing nutrients to pass through while also protecting you from infectious pathogens. A network of capillary blood veins lie beneath the surface, which is covered with cells that generate mucus and fine hairs called fibrocilla. Our nasal cavity aids by filtering infections out of the body. We then sneeze or blow our nose to get rid of the mucus, as well as any microorganisms or particles that may have been collected. Chemical secretions are released by the skin and mucous membranes, which inhibit the growth of germs on their surfaces. Pathogens cannot disturb normal physiological functions and cause disease if they cannot penetrate the host body. When a pathogen enters the skin or the body, it causes an inflammatory response, a group of physical characteristics that act in response to the invasion of a foreign body and pathogen is referred to an inflammatory response. The initial response is increased blood flow to the site of injury, which brings white blood cells and causes inflammatory infection. Fever is caused by a sudden rush of blood and raises core temperatures and encourages an antibiotic effect that lasts until the infection is healed. Phagocytes are large white blood cells that ingest foreign bodies. Complement proteins, such as cytokines, are tiny proteins that aid in the removal of foreign particles from the body. Pathogens are germs that can trigger an immunological response. They include bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and fungi, among others. Examples of these can be seen in Figure 7. A pathogen is something that can cause an infection yet is too small to see with the human eye. Antigens are the parts of the viruses that alert your body that it is being attacked. An antigen is a chemical that triggers an immunological response by activating disease-fighting leukocytes, white blood cells. What is acquired immunity? Acquired immunity is the immunity that develops throughout the course of your life. It could have come from one of the following places: a vaccination that causes another person to produce antibodies in response to an infection or alignment. Acquired immunity is a response that is learned rather than innate. It's shaped by your life experiences as well as the immunity you've accumulated over time. We pick up antigens from our surroundings, which our immune system learns about and produces antibodies to resist. When an antigen enters the body, the acquired immune system detects it and devises a specialized attack for that specific antigen. Our immune system is also capable of learning or adapting and remembering. When we hear the term white blood cells, we think of a small group of immune system cells that fight our conflicts on our behalf. Leukocytes are white blood cells that come in 5 main types. When it comes to allergies and worm infestations, eosinophils are crucial cells. Approximately 0.5 to 1% of white blood cells in your body. However, if you have an allergy symptoms, this number may be higher. Toxins are released by the eosinophils to destroy infections, primarily parasites and worms. Neutrophils are the most prevalent form of white blood cells, accounting for 40 to 60% of white blood cells. They're medium-sized cells having a disorganized nucleus. The first cells on the scene is of infection, and in neutrophils, the invaders are eaten by neutrophils in a process called the phagocytosis. Lymphocytes are spherical tiny cells with a big nucleus. They are produced in the bone marrow and detected in the lymphatic system. They make approximately 18% to 42% of the white blood cells in your body. B cells or T cells develop from lymphocytes. These are the cells that play key roles in immunological memory and manufacture antibodies against certain infections. Antibodies, also known as immunoglobulins, serve a variety of functions. They target infections, recruit immune cells, remove antigens, and complement activation. There are 4 chains in the typical immunoglobulin because 2 of the 4 chains have a slightly higher mass than the other 2. An immunoglobulin molecule can be described as having 2 heavier chains and 2 lighter chains. As an example of this can be seen in Figure 12, and as shown in Figure 13, they are organized in a Y-shaped pattern. Immunoglobulins come in a variety of forms, including the most common immunoglobulin IgG is capable of inducing a direct attack on anything it recognizes as dangerous. IgG is the only type of antibody that can cross the placenta and provide protection to a fetus against infections it hasn't yet encountered. IgA plays an important role in the cellular defense of mucous membrane to the body, for example, inside the mouth. IgM is comprised of 5 monomer immunoglobulins to create a pentamer. It is the first immunoglobulin to appear at the first cell of an antigen. IgE is affected by parasites, infections, as well as allergic reactions. High fever is a disorder characterized by an excess of IgE activity in the body. B cells can use IgD as an antigen receptor. The ability of the body to distinguish between self and non-self is known as self-tolerance. Antigens are used by the immune system to do this. 2 sets of cell surface proteins known as major histocompatibility complexes MHC1 and MHC2, as well as human leukocytes, antigens known as HLA, are the 2 main elements that allow the immune systems to discern the difference between self and foreign bodies. So, if an MHC cell is on the surface of an antigen, the immune system will not fight it or indicate an attack because it is recognized as self. When the immune system encounters a new antigen that it has encountered before, it recognizes it as a non-self and the adaptive immune system responds. The human immune system does not respond to foreign antigens in the same way every time. As a result, depending on the similarities between the new antigen and self, the level of response varies dramatically. This indicates that if the new antigen is identical to the old ones, the response will be modest. However, if the antigen is completely different, the response will be stronger. Repeated exposure to the same antigen causes hypersensitivity, which is abnormal in immunological response. There are 4 categories of hypersensitivity: type 1 immediate, type 2 antibody-mediated, type 3 immune complex-mediated, and type 4 cell-mediated type. Type 1 IgE antibodies induce an immediate reaction. Allergies are an example of this. Antibody-mediated cytotoxicity is a cytotoxic response caused by IgG or IgM antibodies. Reaction to drug medications or even blood transfusions are examples of type 2. Type 3 immune complex mediated can generate an inflammatory response such as rheumatoid arthritis. Type 4 cell-mediated reaction, a delayed reaction caused by a biological response. Type 1 diabetes is an example of this. The act of transplanting cells, tissues or organs from one person to another in order to replace a damaged organ with a healthy organ. Self markers are found on the surface of all nucleated cells in our bodies, and they designate the cells as belonging to the self. Various creatures have their own unique markers. The immune system will recognize that new organs is distinct from the rest of the body's tissue and reject it. Tissue typing guarantees that the organ is as closely matched as possible, yet no 2 persons have identical antigens unless they are identical twins. There are 3 different types of rejection: hyperactive, acute shortly after the transplant. Acute can happen any time between the first week and 3 months. Acute rejection affects all organ recipients in some way, and chronic, a long-term condition in which the body's immune system gradually damages the new organs. There are many different types of autoimmune illnesses, as seen in Figure 18. Rheumatoid arthritis is a long-term autoimmune illness that primarily affects the joints and is classified as type 3 hypersensitivity. Warm swelling and aching joints are common symptoms. There may be periods when symptoms develop, known as flare-ups, and then improve during remission. Type 1 diabetes is a long-term autoimmune condition that falls under hypersensitivity type 4. It's when your immune system targets your body's insulin-producing cells. Excessive thirst, frequent urination, blurred eyesight, and rapid weight loss are all common symptoms of type 1 diabetes. Autoimmune disorders frequently co-occur, so if you have one, you're likely to get others, although the specific reason for the high prevalence of co-occurring autoimmune illnesses is unknown. Many autoimmune disorders don't only attack one part of the body, making it difficult to diagnose. Diagnosing autoimmune disorders entails identifying the antibodies you're producing. This is done through blood testing and significantly more accurate than looking at symptoms alone, because there is currently no cure for autoimmune illnesses. Treatment focuses on managing the disease and reducing the symptoms. An allergic reaction is the body's immune system response to a specific food or item. A reaction can be induced by a variety of things, including pollen foods such as nuts, shellfish, dairy, gluten or house dust mites, asthma, and certain animals, for example cats. IgE-mediated allergies and non-IgE-mediated allergies are 2 main types of allergies. The stages of an allergic reaction can be seen in Figure 19. Starting with acquired immunity, which is the immunity you gain throughout your life. This is then divided into 2 categories. Active immunity refers to your body's response to diseases it has encountered throughout a lifetime, whereas passive immunity refers to antibodies we obtain from somewhere else. Naturally, these are antibodies that the body has produced in response to an illness or infection. Vaccinations, on the other hand, is when the body is deliberately exposed to latent versions of infection to generate antibodies ahead of time. Both types of active immunity take time to establish, but they tend to last a lifetime. Passive immunity is also divided into natural and artificial categories. Antibodies obtained throughout the placenta or our mother's breast milk provide natural passive immunity during the first 6 months of life. Antitoxins and antivenoms neutralize the toxins or venom we may come across. Passive immunity, unlike active immunity, is quick to activate but short-lived. What is a vaccine? The immune system of the body is exposed to a weakened or harmless version of the pathogen during vaccination. Vaccines come in a variety of forms, including live inactivated vaccines as demonstrated in Figure 22. Live vaccines are made up of viruses and bacteria that have been weakened in the laboratory. When using live vaccines, a small dosage of the virus or bacteria is administered, which replicates the body to develop enough bacteria to elect an immune response, causing our antibodies to go through a simulation before we encounter an active case of disease. Inactivated vaccines usually require multiple doses because the first dose just primes the second dose, not providing the immunity. Immunological memory is the process of storing information in the immune system. Immunological memory refers to the immune system's ability to respond to a disease that has been encountered previously. A diagram of the immunological memory can be seen in Figure 23. When a pathogen is encountered for the first time, the primary responsibility is to fight it. It takes time for B cells to recognize and locate the proper antibody, which begins combating it. However, this gives the infection time to take hold and develop symptoms. When a new stimulus is encountered, memory cells are released to remember the correct antibody for a subsequent response. This will allow the immune system to manufacture a bigger number of antibodies in a shorter amount of time before the symptoms appear. The second reaction occurs when the same pathogen is contacted for the second time. Memory cells recognize the pathogen and generate antibodies, which often fights the infection before symptoms appear. The benefits of vaccines aid in the prevention of diseases such as mumps, whooping cough, influenza and diphtheria, as seen in Figure 24. Before the introduction of children immunizations, diseases such as polio and measles were common causes of mortality, and while these diseases still exist, the vaccination programs offer higher protection from major complications. According to the Public Health England and Wales, the rates of measles cases have been steadily decreasing. According to the ONS, life expectancy in 1840 was 40 years old, whereas it was 83 years old in 2019. This is partly due to a decrease in sickness and an increase in vaccines. When the new ONS numbers for COVID-19 are released, it will be interesting to see how much vaccine affects life expectancy. Finally, herd immunity is the most significant reasons to vaccinate. Vaccines are beneficial not only for the people who receive them, but also to those who are too young or unwell to protect themselves against diseases. Many people are allergic to something in vaccines, or their immune system are impaired. The spread of disease can be effectively stopped by herd immunity. When a large percentage of the population is vaccinated, the risks of susceptible persons contracting disease from those who already have it is reduced and demonstrated in Figure 25. As seen with COVID-19, one person is passing to hundreds of others per day. However, depending on the disease, the number of reproductions varies significantly. COVID-19 appears to be more easily transmitted than influenza and can be moved more swiftly from person to person. Unfortunately, there have been numerous health crises related to immunizations in recent years. Figure 26 shows a timeline developed by Public Health England demonstrating the history of vaccines that were introduced and the impact vaccines have had on diseases. As a result, there is a certain degree of misinformation and exaggerated stories. Recent studies show that flu vaccinations reduce the risk of flu illness by between 40 and 60% among the entire population. According to the Centre of Disease Control and Prevention, people's attitudes and views about vaccinations, particularly their negative sentiments, healthcare workers' recommendations, vaccine side effects and effectiveness, are perceived susceptibly at the most critical elements influencing vaccine uptake. Thank you for listening to this presentation on human immunity.